Thank you all for having me here to the Golden Triangle Woodturners at the Greater Denton Arts Council. You know, heard the original Denton Arts Council wasn't that great, but so go to the greater one. Hopefully no one starts the greatest Denton Arts Council. We have to show them who's the greatest. Anyways, a little bit about me. I've only been training about 3 years, but I've been doing art like over 20 years. Started in pottery. Just kind of got into glass blowing a little bit in college. Kind of did it on and off. I was an instructor at Dallas Glass Art, a brief little stint. And kind of during the lockdowns, I got into woodworking, started accumulating some tools, and then I started experimenting around with the wood and metal thing, the wood and pewter. I had like a cool piece of like mesquite, like really figured, like kind of like burly looking mesquite that had this void in it, and I was like, oh, I don't want to do epoxy resin like everyone else. I want to, you know, do something different, you know. So I started messing around with metal. You know, of course, I made all the mistakes. I kind of figured out this method myself. There's still splattered like bismuth on my ceiling in my garage from when I first did that first little piece. So I just started doing flat stuff, and then I went to an art show and saw a wood turner, and then I just saw in my head like, oh, this would tie everything together with the wood and metal and the pottery and the glass, like everything I've kind of been doing. So I got a lathe and then got hooked, and I'm the John Horn's protege here, so we're going to do a little, John Horn's my mentor, so I'm going to do a little bit of a special demo. We're going to tell some stories and pick on John Horn just a little bit, you know, that I would normally do. So John Horn has never seen me demonstrate, so I'm glad he's here to see me demonstrate. So I got into doing metal accents because I really like the contrast of, you know, putting two very different materials in kind of seamlessly into one piece. And it really makes it pop, I think. My kind of thing is I really like to polish to a mirror finish, and hopefully I'll have time to get to that at the end. I'd like to show kind of how I do that. But you know, kind of the purpose of this demo is to encourage you guys to think about, you know, ways that you can incorporate. This is my way with the pewter. There's a ton of different ways to incorporate metal with wood and use metal accents. And it just adds a really nice kind of touch to stand out to it, in my opinion. And what I generally do is I fill like natural voids, like this, and I kind of natural inclusions and kind of natural flaws. I kind of learned to embrace natural flaws in the wood. But tonight what I'm going to do is a little bit of a different kind of application on that same concept. I'm going to demonstrate kind of the pewter foot and kind of filling cups with intentional voids, because you don't always have, you know, a nice like inclusion on like a piece of wood that you can just pour pewter into. The thing about pewter that you really didn't understand, or any metal for that matter, that's different from like epoxy resin, is it doesn't bond to the wood. So it has to be like physically held in place by whatever it's basically cast into. For anybody who wants to try the technique that I'm going to demonstrate tonight, I do have pewter available. Every time when I started doing it, I have pewter available for $35 a pound. This is R98 pewter. I'll talk about the different compounds here in a minute. But I have this available for $35 a pound. I get this from Roto Metals. I just checked Roto Metals on the way up here, and it's now $38 a pound. I don't know if James, maybe you've experienced the price of pewter going up. Like, I don't know if it's tariffs or whatever it is, where it comes from, but it's when I started doing this, it was like $22, $23 a pound, like, I don't know, 3 years ago. So it is going up. I have this available for anybody that wants to try the technique, $35 a pound. Plenty of pewter available. These are brass shavings. These are free. This is a different metal kind of technique. I'll mention cold casting. These are just brass shavings. These are free for anybody that wants to try them. And also, I have candy for free if anyone wants some candy. So.
You might need to pass that one around.
We will. We'll pass some stuff around here in a minute. But yeah, so generally there's kind of two ways to do this. There's filling the natural voids and filling which is kind of my signature thing, what I kind of like to do to highlight flaws in a piece. You know, I kind of like flaws. I see flaws that can be made beautiful. The other way is kind of the intentional way. I've seen kind of like in the wood turning community, some videos and some things, like people doing the pewter rim, and I've seen a lot of different kind of techniques to kind of do the pewter rim. Honestly, I don't think any of them are really correct, but let me tell you why I think that doing a pewter foot is better than doing a pewter rim. For one, it weights the piece correctly from the bottom. So, you know, if you have like a goblet here, and I have this pewter foot on here, then it's going to be very top heavy. You know, and on this piece here, these holes that I drill in here, these actually help hold that pewter rim in, or the pewter foot in place. So if I just had this pewter foot here and didn't have these here, then it wouldn't hold it in place. The way I'm going to show you to do it tonight, if you just do a pewter foot without the drill holes, is we're going to put a little dovetail in there, kind of to hold that piece in place. I am going to pass around to show you. I don't really have time to demonstrate those. This cup takes a lot of different steps, but I'm going to pass around kind of the pre-process, how I drill this and how I set it up and everything, so you can kind of see. We are going to pour pewter in this tonight. I'm probably not going to turn this piece. I'm going to do a stem here and just kind of show the foot, but I'll pass this around so y'all can see. You can drill holes. You can cut a trough in here. I made a goblet for John Horn too, where you can drill a hole kind of just up the middle and pour pewter in there, and then kind of thin it out to where it kind of shows the pewter in the middle. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. But you just want to make sure that the pewter is really held in place. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to prep a little stem here. A wise man once told me, sitting right over there, is that when you do a demo, prepare for anything to go wrong. I was going to use this piece right here. Of course, when I cut it, there's a little inclusion here, and I marked the center, and I was like, oh, that's pretty close to the inclusion. Let me tighten it up on my lathe. I tightened it up on my lathe a few hours ago, and sure enough, it cracked. So anyway, this is the other piece. This is a piece of teak burl. I've never turned teak burl before, but I have kind of a thing for exotic and weird woods. So let's go ahead and make this round, put a tenon in it. I'll show you how to cut that groove, and then we'll melt some pewter, put some pewter in it, and then we'll talk a little bit more about other kind of metal techniques and types of pewter while that pewter is kind of melting and while it's cooling. Pewter is very soft to turn. I'll talk a little bit about the tools I like to use and the way I like to turn it. But it is very soft. You can turn it with high-speed steel tools. In my opinion, for pewter, carbide's better because it doesn't really have a wood grain. Metal kind of likes to be scraped if you have a metal lathe, and then if you're doing like the metal in the wood, the angle of attack of a carbide, the angle of attack of a gouge will tend to want to pull it out of the wood versus like a negative rake angle of a carbide scraper doesn't have that same effect. So remember, like the metal is not bonded in there. It's sitting in there. You don't want to pull it out. When you have a foot like that and it's just, as it goes around, you're kind of just the metal, it's not as big a deal as if it's like a natural inclusion. But let me go ahead and get set up here. We'll get this guy around. So this is typically kind of a tricky cut to make because you have to get in, like if you, did I pass this around already? Yeah. Okay, to get in that little, it's kind of hard to get a gouge into that little groove, to kind of cut that groove. On the foot, I'm about to show you, the groove will be a little bit wider, but of course, on this one, we're cutting straight into end grain. Of course, it's burl and it's teak burl, it's very hard, so it's going to be even more tricky, but I'll show you how I do it. And of course, the best tool I found to use this is in my parting skew that I actually bought from John Horn's. My first parting tool, I got this and I kind of started using it and really liked it. And then I go over to John's for another like wood turning lesson, we're doing sharpening and everything, and like John's showing me the proper way to sharpen all the tools and everything. And I'm like, okay, well, what about this parting skew that I got from you? And so John, the skew horn, tells me, oh, you know, I don't think that's supposed to be the skewed like that. This is the standard way, you know, you sharpen a parting tool, you know, nice and square and everything, you know. And I was like, okay, but then I went back and put the skew back on it because I really like this little, I really love my little parting skew. I use this all the time for everything. It's one of my favorite skews, one of my favorite parting tools. Little, just kind of getting in little details and everything. Highly recommend you make one. I love it. Oops. So you might have a better way to make this cut because it is kind of a weird cut, but I use a parting tool. It's kind of it's kind of hard to get a gouge in there. If you know a better way to make this cut, let me know. But the tricky thing is like you on this one, because you don't have the holes I drill in there to hold that piece of pewter in there, you have to dovetail this way so it holds that pewter in there. I'm going to use I'm not doing anything too crazy. I'm just going to use safety glasses instead of my normal face shield. And generally, so like this is going to be a goblet stem. So on a goblet stem, you generally kind of want the base as wide as possible. So because it's a tall, top-heavy thing. So you really want to start with at least a 3x3 length. You know, 4x4 would be better, especially if you're doing something like a pewter foot, because once you put the pewter in there and take away from it, take the excess wood away, it's going to be a little bit smaller. And I'll leave about, I don't know, a 1/4 inch or so, like on the outside, you know, just to keep the pewter from falling out. Actually smells really good. Now, total depth I'm looking here for on the foot is about 3/8 of an inch to like thickness. Into where I'm gonna, you know, from the bottom where I'm gonna dig in, but and that little skew tip on my parting skew really helps like get in that corner because you're kind of coming in from some kind of a weird angle sometimes, but it really helps, you know, get those corners square and tight when you're cutting that little groove just like that. And so that's pretty much the setup for the pewter foot. And you can do this on a bowl or a goblet stem or whatever. I like the pewter foot a lot better than the pewter rim because it properly weights the piece from the bottom. And if you're doing a pewter rim, you know, you have to hollow out the inside, which is kind of the piece of wood that holds the pewter in place. So we'll go ahead and heat up some pewter because it's going to take a minute to heat for the pewter. I got a few things to talk about, but so this is R98 pewter. You can reheat your pewter scraps. You can do this. Pewter melts at like 450. This alloy pewter around 450-ish. You pour it like 500 or so it doesn't burn the wood. You can melt it on your stove top at home if you like. You know, eventually, you know, if you keep doing it, you probably want to get out of the kitchen. So, you know, I got a little hot plate. You can just use a little skillet here to melt it. Go ahead and turn that on so it's melting while I talk about pewter stuff.
When you're normally drilling your holes, do you use a drill press or are you using a drill guide? to get them straight and even all the way
I
around?
use a drill press. Of course, the first time I tried this, I was like, I didn't know what I was doing. I had a drill and was just drilling holes. But yeah, now I kind of use a drill press to get it accurate. Another way to heat pewter, I saw this from one of James Thurman's videos, is this little thing is pretty cool. It's like a little lead casting, smelting, handheld thing. This thing kind of works good for, I don't know, it says it'll melt like 4 or 5 pounds of pewter. That's probably stretching it. You know, it'll, like in general, I think it melts like a pound plus like what's ever left over from your last melt. But so this is good for like smaller things, but for something bigger where we're pouring a lot of pewter like this here, I like to use this just because it's more heat and it melts faster and everything. So we're going to use this. When you're doing, of course, what I'm going to do tonight with pouring pewter in this and this, there's no need to like seal the other end. So sometimes when you're doing natural voids, you want to seal, you know, one side of it so the pewter doesn't pour out, right? The first time I did this, I pretty much like clamped a board to it with a piece of foil in between, which will work, you know, it can work. It's probably not the best way. I mean, you can use like high temp silicone and plaster too, but what I found I really like to kind of control where the pewter goes is this high temp flue tape. It's kind of like HVAC tape. This is a steel tape. HVAC tape will work. I think HVAC tape is aluminum, but this is 3M and this is rated to like 750 degrees. So it'll be fine. A lot of my stuff, like when I did this, you know, I pretty much wrapped it up in high temp tape. So that's a really great way to kind of control where the pewter is going to go. So why do I like to use pewter? I know it's gotten more expensive lately, but it's non-toxic, unlike lead, and it's a low melting point. So it's not going to burn your wood, and you don't need a ton of special equipment. You can do this at home in your kitchen if you want. You know, I wouldn't use your wise pots and pans. Get your own skillet or whatever, but it's super easy. You know, aluminum, brass, copper, like all those melt above the point of spontaneous combustion for wood. So it's going to burn your wood to a certain degree, and it polishes up really nice. It's a really pretty metal. There's a lot of different ways to do metal and wood, but I mean the main thing you pretty much have to remember is the metal doesn't bond to the wood, so it has to be held in place or attached in some way. As far as wood selection goes, we'll talk a little bit about wood selection while we're waiting for this pewter to melt. When I'm doing intentional voids, I do like to kind of choose premium, you know, like nice, like Purple Heart or I guess teak burl in this case. But generally, when I look for wood, I look for like for natural voids, I look for like a flawed piece of wood that's like a weird something like this that like no one's going to want to turn because this crack here, you know, that people don't like, but I see a way to make it beautiful. And I like to say that, you know, look for wood kind of like Jesus chose his disciples, because he didn't choose like the rich and powerful Pharisees as his followers. He chose people kind of cast aside, seen as not worthy by the church. You know, the sick, the poor, the hungry, the tax collector, you know, even the guy that was stoning Christians, you know, people seen as not worthy by the church, but not necessarily the Pharisees. But he saw these flaws, you know, that could be made beautiful when filled with Christ, or with, you know, pewter in this case. And, you know, this was once a living tree, but now has another life after its actual life. It kind of represents life after death. So anyway, that's my little sermon for you guys. You know, John Horn, if you ever met John Horn, you know, he probably showed you a cool pen that he made, you know, he's kind of well known for, and you didn't know you were about to get witnessed to, but, you know, he tells you this whole story about how, you know, he made this mistake and everything, you know, how the bloodwood represents, you know, the blood of Christ, and you know, the Bethlehem olive wood and everything. He does a great job telling that story, and, you know, so, anyway, once told me, you know, I really need somebody to like take over this, and I'm like, you know what, it's like your pen story, but I can kind of tell a similar story with in my own way, with my own stuff. So let's talk about okay, different types of pewter. So there are different alloys of pewter. Pewter is mainly an alloy, a tin-based alloy. So this pewter is R98 pewter. That means it's 98% tin. It's 1.5% bismuth and 0.5% copper. The reason I use this alloy of pewter is because it's less shrinkage. So it'll hold in place better, and it'll help get into those smaller details better. Sometimes I use another alloy I like to use is R92 pewter, 92% tin, 8% antimony. That pewter is it's a little bit harder. I think it's like the hardest alloy of pewter. It's just like more durable, less likely to scratch and stuff. That's another good alloy to use. A lot of times you'll see, like when you buy pewter, if you see like a pewter teapot or a platter or a tea set or something, that's typically made out of what they call Britannia pewter, which is, or also known as AC pewter, which is 92% tin, 7.75% antimony, and 0.25% copper. They use that alloy because it's more malleable for pressing into things and hammering and shaping coal. But there's a ton of different types of pewter. There's R95, R97. You can use pure tin. The first time I did this, I tried with pure bismuth actually, because I was like, oh, look at these weird rainbow colors you can get with bismuth. But anyway, don't do that. The pewter is. I've tried a lot of alloys, and I really like the pewter, even though it's expensive. Pewter is my favorite. It's just really great to work with. It turns nice on the lathe. It's low melting temperature. It's a little expensive, but it turns really nice. Pewter is very similar in alloy to solder. So if you have, sometimes you can actually, if you look at this cup closely, sometimes there might be an air bubble in here where maybe the pewter wasn't hot enough when you poured it in there, and it didn't fill all the way in there, and there's like a bubble here, and you can kind of see where I fixed it. So I did fix this with solder, actually. If you want to look closely, you can see my mistakes here, how I fixed it. But so solder is very similar to pewter, but it's when you pour a lot of pewter, you need a lot more heat than a little soldering iron is typically going to provide. So it works good for fixing little mistakes, but is not really ideal for casting. Okay, so there's a ton of different ways to do metal and wood, right? So I like, just be creative when you think about this. Of course, the pewter is kind of like my signature technique thing that I really like to do the most, but I experiment around with a lot of it. There's metal spinning, which you saw James demonstrate, which is really cool. I want to get into, figure that out once I get the tool rest and the right tools. Wire wraps, you can do a lot of fun things with wire wraps, and cold cast too. I'm going to pass this little bottle opener around. This is my kind of personal bottle opener here because it's got a wire wrap and it's got my logo here with a cold cast. So with the wire wraps, I use brass or copper usually. The main thing about doing a wire wrap, it's not that hard. It's pretty easy, but there's a couple things you need to know. One is like tucking in the ends and where you tuck them into. If you look where I tuck the ends onto, like how they're in line with the logo and the bottle opener and slightly offset here on the end, once I pass this around, is kind of like how you want to do it. This is kind of the tie-it wire wrap, like this is kind of like the easy way, where you kind of create a groove and wrap it tight and tuck in the ends. The harder way is where you kind of like index it and do like a helix, or so where you have gaps in there and you kind of have to cut a groove. It can be done, but it takes a little bit more time and effort and materials to just do an easy one. So I'll pass this around if anyone wants, just to help you think about other ways to do metal and wood. If anyone wants like the brass shavings, I got a bunch of them. Just come take, they're free. Just come take a little scoop of them.
Can you explain what cold cast is?
Yes, okay. So the way, that's a good question. So the way a cold cast works, so pewter won't go into every little small crack and everything, like you'll see on this mug. It'll go into like bigger cracks, but the really small ones, it doesn't really like to stay in there. So, but you can use brass shavings, and the way you do a cold cast is you put brass shavings in there and you basically fill it with CA glue. You can use a thin epoxy, but like C8 glue is faster and better. With, you know, you do a little thin and do some medium, and then basically turn it, and then, you know, kind of polish it and everything. So it's a cold cast is a pretty easy metal and wood technique you can use. Brass shavings are cheap. Copper shavings are pretty cheap, cheaper than a pound of pewter. So it's kind of a easy way to get started. There's, you know, attaching things like with mechanical means, like, I mean, think beyond like a bottle stopper or a pen, but, you know, like if you find some weird random piece at a garage sale or something, but see a way that it can be attached to something you made to like make it beautiful or whatever. So there's all sorts of things you can do with mechanically attaching metal pieces or machine pieces. I mean, if you have a machine shop or experience with metal lathes in your shop, then you have all sorts of, you know, resources that most of us don't have. There's like the Nick Agar method, which I don't know if you all know who that was. He demonstrated for my club a little bit, where he does these Viking bowls and everything, but he makes the wood, parts of the wood look like it's metal, even though it's not. So that's always kind of a cool way to make, you know, art, is to make something out of something, but make it look like it's made of something else, you know? So that's kind of there's a famous, there's a potter I follow who makes stuff look like it's made of metal, and there's actually a furniture maker, a wood furniture maker I follow too, who does all these like screws and like makes things look like they're like industrial metal, like when you look closer it's wood and everything. I'm almost melted here. So this is, yeah, look at, yeah.
On that, one where you've got the foot, the next foot, the other. How much pewter weight-wise is in that?
To cast this is, you probably need about a pound on this one. Of course, these holes, I want to say, there's 8 of them, and I think those are 5/16 on the diameter of the holes there. But yeah, so you need, to do something like this, you need at least a pound.
Tablets probably more than that?
Yeah, because it's the foot. I mean, this one was a little smaller, and I didn't drill the holes as deep, so this is probably actually, I mean, even though it's 2 pieces, it's probably roughly a pound of pewter. Let me grab my piece here. Oh, so here's a mistake I made the very first time that I don't want y'all to make, so I learned the hard way. This is how I got bismuth on the rear ceiling in my garage. Okay, so in glass blowing, we use like wooden paddles and blocks to shape the glass, but what we do is they're made of cherry wood. We soak them in water so that it doesn't, when you put it on 2,000 degree glass, it doesn't burn the tool. So I was thinking, this was when I was doing class, so I was like, okay, so I need to wet the wood, right? I need to moisturize the wood so it doesn't burn the wood. Don't do that. So metal is not glass. Metal, that moisture will turn into steam, and it'll pop, and it's bad. You don't want molten metal popping. You want your wood dry. The pewter is not hot enough to really burn your wood, so don't worry about that. It's not like 2,000 degrees glass. So like you do want it dry, but when you do this, you always want to, even casting pewter, you want to keep your safety glasses on, just in case you have any pops or anything like that. So let's cast some pewter here. Oh yeah, sorry.
So would very fresh green wood that's like very moist, would that be too much internal water to cast?
Yeah. So the question is is green wood too moist to cast? It could be. Typically, no. Like we're about to find out, this piece is fairly green. It's probably not, but you want to wear your glasses just in case. There can be little pops, you know. Like when I did this one, there were a few like little pops. You just kind of want to be careful and when you do this. But yeah, dryer is definitely kind of the better way to go. Any other questions?
If you're doing a pour and you don't have enough, and you have to go back and add some more, does it eliminate that transition?
The cold.
So you sometimes, okay, so generally pouring all at once is kind of the best way to go. But because but you don't always have enough, and sometimes you do have to do multiple pours if you have like multiple inclusions and this and that. But when you do a multiple pour, you do kind of want to at least the other pewter that's in there to be kind of hot for it to bond together, because you might have a little, if the pewters, you pour hot pewter on a cold pewter, you know, you might have a little seam or something like that where it doesn't exactly bond together. So you kind of want it to all be hot, you know, even if you have to pour multiple times. Any other questions?
What temperature does pewter melt at?
About 450, depends on the alloy. Yeah, about 450 for this alloy right here. But we like to pour it about 5 to 550 on the, a little hotter than the melting point.
Do you recover your pewter shavings?
Not the shave, like if there's leftover pewter, I'll recover that, but the shavings, they don't really, you can, a lot of times they're mixed with wood, you know, shavings, so you don't want that. But I've had like balls of it where I was turning something that was just pewter, and I tried to melt it, and so when you melt pewter, because the surface area on that pewter that like reacts with the, I don't know, the air and like carbonizes or oxidizes or something. So when you melt the pewter, it creates this stuff in there called slag, which is a byproduct of melting metal, any type of metal. So before we pour the pewter, we do want to, I just use a spoon, we do want to kind of scrape off some of that slag here. Slag. But yeah, so if you took a bunch of shavings and threw it in this pot, you would probably get some, and let's just say there's no wood in those shavings, so it's nice clean pewter. You'd probably be able to recover some of that pewter, but you'd get a lot of slag because of the surface area of that pewter. So it's kind of nice to just use a little. And you can use, this probably isn't, I probably don't need this glove, but I'll just, if it does get hot, you can use a little glove to kind of pour it with. It just kind of helps. Probably not necessary with this little rubber thing in here.
How long is it hot enough to pour? How quickly does it cool?
I mean, it's pretty, I mean, it like, I don't know, I've been heating this for probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 minutes now, but we'll just, I'll show you, is the camera angle good on this?
Yeah, that's good.
Now, I want to come a little bit just above the surface, the level of the surface here, because like it kind of bubbles and curves. So once I kind of flush that out, it's a nice tight seam, and there's not a gap between the wood and everything. Let's see how much I have here for this next one. Let me kind of repeat this a little bit.
You get air bubbles in those tubes that you drilled?
So.
Or is it-
Hopefully not. That's why you want the pewter hot enough. But yeah, like I said, it can happen. So this happened on this one, and you can come take a closer look and see how I fixed it with a piece of solder here. But yeah, there is a really bad air bubble there in one of them. But yeah, you want to, of course, you want to make sure all the, you know, your drilling like sand, sawdust is kind of out of there. But this one. There we go.
Question?
So,
Question?
yeah.
So would there be a minimum size of drill hole that you want to use?
Yeah,
That's what happens?
because if you go too small, the pewter's not going to want to like sink in there. And what I kind of found it works for me is I really like this 5/16. I don't want to go too small, much smaller than that, but I don't want to go much bigger than that because I don't want to waste pewter. it's expensive. But yeah, you can't, like if you drill, I don't know, much smaller than like a 1/4 inch, you're going to have a hard time getting pewter to go in there. Sometimes when there's like a, say you have an inclusion on the side of a bowl, but it's weird, it's not going to, like the shape of it is such that it won't hold the pewter in place. Sometimes I will kind of drill like kind of like temporary like holes in here that the pewter will kind of sink into to anchor that inclusion into place, and then when I hollow it out, I'll turn it away. That's just kind of a little little technique I figured out to fix it. Of course, we do want this to be mostly pretty much cool before we turn it. This one's going to take quite a bit longer to cool because of the amount of pewter that's in there. This one should cool fairly quickly. What other questions we have?
How deep do you, like, I see there you've got fairly deep drill holes,
Yeah.
and that's a cool decorative bit, but to save pewter, how shallow can you get if you want?
Yeah, I mean, you could make this like like to hold this foot on there, like probably an inch would be fine. You can go shallow. I did kind of make one where I messed up the depth I was drilling of these cups, and I didn't drill one. I was drilling them, and I drilled one this way, and I drilled like one like too short or something. I don't remember. And I had to go with it, and I had one where it's just like short, tall, short, tall, short, tall. You know, so you can do shorter. I kind of like to come up, I don't know, 3/4 of the way of the cup is kind of like what I think looks best. But yeah, you can go as pretty much as deep or as shallow as you want. Just that, you know, as long as it's kind of anchored in there.
And that candy bowl you've got right there, does that have drilled in holes on the bottom of it as well?
No, so the bottom is here. I'll pass this around because just take a piece of candy. Y'all can look at it. But so the bottom is dovetail, which is the same technique that I did on this piece that I'm demonstrating on this piece. So it's a dovetail on the inside that kind of holds that pewter into place.
How did you hold the pewter on the wall of the bowl?
Okay, so yeah, that one was a little tricky, and I'll be honest with you because it's on the lip there on the edge. It's kind of a weird shape. It is kind of inclined to want to fly out of there. And to be honest with you guys, that piece of pewter did fly out of that bowl. You're not going to notice that by looking at that, but so that's only like the third wood bowl out of wood that I've made successfully out of wood. But there's candy in there to hide out tear out that I didn't stand out of that bowl. Yeah. But anyway, so that piece of pewter, because it was on the lip and didn't have much to hold it in place, when I was spinning it, it did come out. You could probably use tape or something to hold it into, but I did CA glue that back in there and made it work. So sometimes after the pewter cools, if there's a little gap in there between the pewter and the wood, you use CA glue to kind of fill that gap, and it really helps anchor that piece of pewter in there, and really so it doesn't fly out or move around or whatever. It helps kind of because the pewter doesn't bond there. The CA glue will fill that gap. You do not want to put CA glue on when the pewter is hot because I forget the temperature. Something about you want it to be cool before you touch CA glue because a certain temperature makes the cyanide come out of that CA glue. And cyanide is bad. So we don't want to do that.
When you glue it, are you using a thin or a thick CA glue?
The question is, what CA glue do I use when I glue it? Generally, I use the medium Star Bond. Sometimes the thin, but generally, I really like the medium. It's kind of good for everything.
So with this, you basically did you did the profile, the basic profile, and then filled the void, and then did the finished turn?
Yeah. You do you want to do you kind of want to do a little bit of a rough turn because you don't want to waste too much pewter, right? But if it's just on a flat side, that's kind of ideal. But you don't want to completely turn your shape because you need to turn away a little bit of pewter. And yeah, I used that was a pewter tenon too. I used that as a tenon. Of course, I turned away the tool marks later, but the tenon was actually pewter on the chuck. Other questions?
I got a comment.
Yep.
I've been coming to meetings 15 or more years, and you're the first ones that ever brought candy.
I know, cool.
Cookies get invited.
5-star reviews, then. Yeah, okay, gotta make an impression. Bribe you all with some candy. Cool. I'm glad the candy's appreciated. That's my candy bowl at home now. So.
A lot more slots.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a good advice. Yeah.
When you drill the holes, do you just wait till it's cool to the touch? How do you know when the deeper ones are done?
Well-
especially if you're in a hurry.
When the pewter is.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you can, don't touch the pewter, but you can just feel the sides of that. And yeah, it's, I mean, that's gonna take a while to cool because of the amount of pewter in there. But yeah, I mean, I mean, yeah, you can kind of lightly touch it, but like, I go to work on something else and take a break and come back in like 30 minutes and it'll be cool enough.
Can you assist in the cooling, like say putting it in an ice box or helping that way?
I mean, you don't wanna cool too fast. Like, you don't wanna like plunge it in water or something. So sometimes, because like you kind of want it to naturally cool because it doesn't take that long, but it sets up better, you know, when you don't cool, when you let it cool evenly and don't, you know, kind of cool like a surface part faster. I mean, you can put it under a fan maybe, but like I wouldn't plunge it or try to super cool it. It's not going to take that long. You know, I would just like take a break and spend 15, 20 minutes or whatever, you know, and work on something else and then kind of go back to it.
I have a question about
Yeah.
copper and the filings of copper and
Yeah.
brass. You said it's inexpensive. Where can you buy it in bulk?
So you can buy the copper and brass shavings. You can also buy those from Roto Metals. They're cheaper, but you can also find them on Etsy. A lot of people like the key shavings. You know, a lot of manufacturers, they kind of just have these like left over, and you can buy them in different. I've kind of been playing around with the different sizes of shavings too, because there's like I kind of like a sand. Like the powder, you can do a powder cold cast, but it's more of a satin finish. It's not going to pop as much. The sand, you know, is a little bit bigger particles, and it kind of sparkles a little bit and it reflects light a little bit better. It's a little bit bigger material than powder, and you can get more like CA glue to kind of in there, so it's a little stronger material. These are like kind of little bits of wire and stuff. There's, you know, so there's different sizes, but you'll kind of experiment around and you'll find a size of the materials that kind of fits in there. Good, but yeah, so check Etsy and like Roto Metals does sell some stuff, but Etsy is good. Yeah,
just a comment.
go ahead.
I actually got free metal shavings from the little key makers. I just hunted down a Home Depot employee and asked if I could have them. I got kind of a weird look, but he let me have them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a mix. I mean, it's whatever metals that.
High metal,
Yeah.
low.
Yeah.
So we use inlays, powder metals like
Yeah.
that. You do it kind of like
But-
turquoise,
Still
use
pretty.
different sizes.
Yep, kind of just like turquoise. So. Yep, go ahead.
Use the Beal buff on this? I'm trying to get this.
So, okay, so if you use the wheel buffing system on pewter, of course, it's gonna darken those wheels, and you only want to use those buffing wheels on metal only, and kind of thing. Because the tricky thing when you're polishing this is to not get like with the pewter polish will like turn black and darken your wood. So you kind of do it, well, a lot of times I do my final polish by hand and just sit in front of a TV. And I'll get to this here in a minute. I'll kind of show you how I do it to just so it doesn't like darken the wood. Also using darker woods like Purple Heart or Black Walnut is going to kind of hide that a little bit so that you don't, you know, if you use like maple or something, sometimes there's a little bit of a kind of, from where you polish, a little like kind of dark stain and everything. So, but learning how to not kind of darken the wood around it with your pewter polish is kind of a tricky thing that is best done by hand polishing, in my opinion. And that way you don't mess up your deal buffing wheels and everything, get them all black and everything. So once you put metal on there, they'll turn black.
Does pewter take a fingerprint?
So yes, it does. The question is, does pewter fingerprint? So yeah, that's another tricky thing about finishing too. So on something that's handled like this a lot, like over time, you know, the fingerprints will kind of cloud. It doesn't tarnish quite as bad as silver, but like the fingerprints will kind of cloud it, and it will not pop as much. If it's sitting on a shelf like that bowl, it'll probably be fine. The tricky thing is that the metal looks best with polished with no finish on it. So when you put a finish on it, it's either not going to be as shiny, or it makes the wood too shiny. I like the contrast between, I want the metal to be shiny and the wood to be satin, generally, so that there's a contrast between the metal and the wood. So you can do film finishes to protect it. I've tried a little bit of everything, and there's, you can use waxes, Renaissance wax, automotive wax is a good kind of temporary thing that you can put on here that'll help. This one is actually something called permaclear, which is for jewelry. There is a film finish over here. I've tried, epoxy resin on the outside is kind of tricky, and it's going to be a little bit too thick of a finish. I've tried a nano ceramic finish, which is kind of like they do on cars, but they make a nano ceramic graphene-based finish that they use for like epoxy river tables and everything that you can put on there, and it kind of helps resist the fingerprints and oils from your hand for something that's going to be handled like that. But yeah, I kind of want the shine on the metal to last as long as possible, but not. I don't want like too thick of a film finish. I want I want it to look like there's no finish on it. But yeah, good question.
Do you finish the inside differently then?
Yes. So on the inside of all the drinkware is epoxy resin finish. Epoxy resin you need to kind of slow turn it to cure, like typically overnight. Epoxy resin is like one of the only for any alcoholic beverage, it's the way to finish the inside of a cup. A lot of finishes, I mean, might be food safe, but like alcohol will kind of start to dissolve a little bit of finishes once there's alcohol in there, but not epoxy resin. Epoxy resin on the outside is way trickier because if you slow turn it, it's going to have it's going to want to migrate. You'll have thicker, thinner places. On the inside, it's a little bit easier. Because it kind of forces it to the centrifugal force forces it to the outside. On the inside of doing epoxy resin finish on the inside, you can get away on your lathe at 50, 60 RPMs. For outside epoxy finish, which I stay away from, you need like 5 or 6 RPMs so that it doesn't kind of migrate all over there. But yeah, for any alcoholic beverage, I highly recommend food safe epoxy resin on the inside, and it's washable too, because it's for something that people are going to wash or whatever, it's going to be in contact with liquids. Epoxy resin is really kind of the way to, and especially on this, because turning this, I was obviously afraid this was going to fly apart when I was following it, but once you get the resin on there, it kind of holds everything together, so it's not going anywhere. But good question. Anyone else? All right, cool. Well, I think this is probably, this one's cool enough to turn. I'll go ahead and show you how I turn this, and hopefully we'll have time to show a little bit of, just kind of how I finish it and kind of get it to a mirror finish a little bit. How much time do I have? All right, well,
Half an hour.
I better get busy. Where's the spindle lock on this leg?
Back on the front.
Front.
But
Oh, back on the front.
on the front,
There's a button in the front on the right side.
Oh, there it is. All right, so this next part I am going to demonstrate with carbide tools, which I know is a little bit taboo in the wood turning club, but You know, a couple reasons I'm gonna do this, of course, if you're a new turner, you probably bought a set of these, just like I did, because you know, you didn't have a fancy sharpening system.
You need to pay a fine to use that.
I figured, yeah, you know, it's okay.
You brought candy.
But yeah, like I said, metal kind of likes to be scraped because there is no really grain direction. You know, so if you have a metal lathe, you know, a lot of times you use carbide cutters to turn the metal. And it's not so much on this because the pewter foot is not, as it turns around, we're not going metal to wood, but like I said, so the negative rake attack of a carbide tool is not going to tend to want to pull that metal out of the wood like a slicing. When you come up and it wants to, like a gouge is going to kind of want to grab it. You can turn metal with a high-speed steel gouge. It will dull your tool quickly. But for metal, I kind of like to use carbide. You know, carbide is, you know, there are some things that is kind of nice for. This is, I'm going to use the round, you can use round or square, I brought my square one too. This is the Ron Campbell carbide tool, which I really like. I got this at SWAT. Of course, gotta love that axe handle, you know, it's kind of like, it just feels good in the hand. So, this is a good one, I recommend it. Kind of comes with all the, you know, different cutters. If y'all are carbide people, but a little bit lower. On the tool rest and you would on the gouge. But so mainly on the carbide is the slight negative kind of angle of attack, so you don't get a catch. Don't do that either.
Did it damage the floor?
We'll be okay. Of course, the round carbide is such a versatile tool. You know, yeah, it may not give you the cleanest cut, like right off the tool. I'll show you how to kind of get some cleaner cuts with it, like how to do a finishing cut. But with metal, it's really kind of nice. See, the pewter turns real nice and easy once you kind of, if it's not in the wood and you're just turning this little pewter foot, and you get these nice, really long ribbon shavings. Like sometimes they kind of come off kind of really long, like not quite as bad as like when you're turning resin, but just gonna do a little feather cut. So, of course, the pewter, it is soft, to turn, but compared to metal, but it's not as soft as wood. It's still harder than wood. So when you are turning something with pewter in it, you don't want to be too aggressive. You kind of want to just take your time with it, make kind of light, kind of slower cuts. This is how you make your man glitter glitter. Of course, on a spindle, of course this is burl wood, so it's irregular grain, but even with carbide, we still want to cut downhill on a spindle. Of course, this part here, yeah, I probably normally would cut with a spindle gouge or a bowl gouge. I didn't bring my spindle gouge or bowl gouges. Probably would have gotten in the way too long conversation about bowl gouges, but you can use carbide too. So making a goblet stem is kind of technically a type of handle, right? So when you start to get close, you know, you put your hand on it and see like how it fits in your hand, how it feels in your hand. I haven't made a top piece for this one yet, so I don't know what diameter or transition. I'm going to leave the top piece a little bit rough, but I'll kind of get it a little closer. Let's take a little bit more off. I probably won't thin this out quite as much as I normally would like to, just for the sake of time and simplicity. Okay, let's just say that's our goblet's in shape. I'm gonna shape up the top of this one a little bit more probably once I get a, the top piece made for it. I don't really know what shape it's gonna be yet. That's pretty close. So a finished cut on a carbide tool to get a kind of a cleaner cut, as clean as you can on a carbide tool, is, so you kind of want to, you take it light, but you angle, rather than coming straight in kind of like this, at this light negative rate, you kind of angle it over like this. And that's the carbide piece, right? Probably not as clean of a finish off the tool as like doing a bowl gouge. The finish cut on the carbide tool is kind of angle it like that, and it'll give you a fairly, about as good as you can get with a carbide tool. And those are, I don't know if you can see on the camera, those are almost angel hair shavings. Not quite as small as you get on the bowl gouge, but they're pretty close. It's not too. So yeah, that's not a bad finish off the tool. I don't know, there's a little bit, I don't know if you can kind of see right there. That's not a horrible, there's not much tear out on that from the carbide tool. I do kind of want to get to finishing just to show you all kind of how I finish it, and you'll have some really good questions about sanding and finishing earlier. Yeah. Oh, good.
It's just moving away over.
Oh, here we go. All right, we good? All right. All right, I do want to kind of sand this and show you all how I would normally take this to a mirror polish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand. I know this is the most exciting part of the demo is the sanding. Why y'all are all here to see sanding, but so if you do need to take a bathroom break, now's probably the time. But so the way I do this is I'm going to sand to 600. Then I'm going to put the sanding sealer on at 600. The sanding sealer generally just kind of helps you fill in those grains and pores so the black polish doesn't get into the wood. And then I do one last sanding at 1,000, and then I go to hand polishing at generally. For this, because it's a pewter foot, I can machine polish this on the machine and just hold it there. I mean, normally I wouldn't do that because if the pewter is in the wood here, it will blacken the wood around. But that's the way I do it. I'll show you real quick. And it'll polish up real nice. I also found going beyond 1,000, 1,500 grit will also tend to darken the wood. I found if you go kind of from, take it up to about 1,000, 1,500, and then from there, that's kind of you can go straight to polishes and be fine. Oh, I'm gonna drop that tool again. And you can use a drill sander or whatever type of sander you typically like, but this is kind of an easy way. I generally like to sand a little faster just because, I don't know, sandpaper is a consumable thing that I throw away and I just want to get the job done. And sanding's not exactly the most fun part of creation, but it's necessary. Unless you're Stuart Batty.
So what grit did you start with?
This is 120. I might have been able to start a little higher, but I just generally start at 120 just to, I mean, my cuts aren't as clean as Stuart Batty, so I generally start at 120. If I don't have to start at 80, I'm good. As I go up in grits, I turn the speed up a little bit because, you know, you're less friction, so you don't have quite as much heat. And you get, I kind of like to, on the higher grits, I do kind of like to burnish a little bit because it gives kind of a good shine to the wood. I'm not sanding all the way up here because I am gonna, once I get the top piece made, I'm gonna return this top end of that.
So when you're normally doing this, do you do the top piece first and then do the foot? Or
You know, it's kind of, I don't really, it's like a bunch of steps. So it's kind of like, I'll start, you know, the top piece and the bottom piece, and then I'll pour some pewter into it, and then I'll kind of get the outside kind of where I want, you know, and the outside's good, and then I'll, you know, hollow the top piece, and then I'll put it together. You know, the more, what I find out is, like, this goes for any, not just wood turning, but any type of art, is like, when I started, you're making a lot of, like, kind of like single pieces, like a bowl or a cup or something, but as you start to, like, progress, you start to think about, you know, making pieces and putting them together into, like, a bigger concept or a bigger, you know, art piece, made of multiple pieces. You know, and the more you do that, and the more whatever, as you get more advanced and things get more complicated, order of operations becomes increasingly important. Like, well, okay, what order am I going to do this step and this step and this step? And if you know, even if you don't make like a normal like catch or like a normal mistake, you crack it or whatever. You know, if you screw up the order of operations and then you're like, oh crap, I did this and now I can't go back and I can't do this. Like sometimes that screws you too. So order of operations is kind of crucial, especially on something like that cup there, because there's so many different steps, you know, to kind of get it there, you know, and it's hard to do. You can't really do it all in one day because it's like, oh, you do the outside and then you drill it and then you do the next day you do the pewter, okay, then you turn the outside again the next day, okay, then following day you hollow out the inside, okay, and then you do the epoxy finish too. That takes a whole day, you know. So it's like kind of one step at a time. You kind of got to have a lot of, you know. That's why I always have multiple projects going all at the same time because they're all in different kind of phases of completion. Other questions while I'm sanding? I'm getting there. I'm just getting there. 400.
Do you have concerns about getting the pewter into the wood floors?
Yes. So yeah. So the pewter will darken the wood, like especially if it's in here. When it's at the bottom, you know, you kind of just come here and you just do the bottom, and not come back, then you're kind of good. But for something like that and like that, so this is that's why I do it kind of the way I do. So I sand up to 600. So when at 600 and below, you don't really have as, I don't know, I guess the fineness of it. The pewter dust doesn't really get into the wood pores that bad. So so we're gonna do 600, and then I'm gonna put on the coat of sanding sealer right before I do my last grit of sand. And that'll, because once you get to like 1,000 and above, then you kind of have more, and especially polishing, then you kind of have more of the issue. You can see how much just on that, barely touched it, how much that darkened, how much pewter is in that piece of sandpaper. So I turn it around. I don't want to use that piece when I come over here to my wood to kind of keep the pewter out of there. But yeah, so finishing is always, and keeping the pewter dust out of your wood pours is always something that's kind of on your mind, especially with lighter colored woods. Maple is, really hard. Luckily, this is a pretty dense wood. I don't think we're going to have a ton of issues here. Of course, I'm just doing a pewter foot. I'm not doing a whole complicated pewter fill, but let's do some sanding sealer. Pretty good, not bad. Might be a little smelly for this one from the road, but oh no, that's not good. Brand new bottle of sanding sealer. Alright, so put it on slow so it soaks in, and then burnish it in, turn it up, burnish it in.
Do you try to not get that on the pewter?
Oh, you can get it on the pewter. I mean, it's not it doesn't really, I mean, you don't want it on the polished pewter, but once we sand and polish it, anything that's on the pewter, like if I come there, it's going to come right off. It's such a thin kind of coat. Turn it up real quick, burnish it in. High speed, heavy pressure. Just gives it a nice little finish, any excess. Now I'll do one more grit on the pewter and then polish it, but you can see even just the sanding sealer, 600 grit, that's a perfectly fine finish. It's pretty, teak pearl is really pretty. Hard to turn, but pretty. All right, last grit, 1,000. Not really necessary to do the whole thing in 1,000, just kind of where the pewter's at, to make our polishing a little bit easier. Just kind of light touch here. That's probably good. We'll polish and we'll pass this around. Okay, so polishing. Where'd my polishes go? Okay, so these are the two. These are the two polishes I've been kind of using for a while. When I first started doing this, I used automotive polishes because that's what I had in my garage. The Griot's Garage stuff, like it works great. I tried all sorts of metal polishes. A lot of them I don't really like. Silver polishes and stuff I don't like as much because of just the way it gets in the wood compared to automotive polishes. These are also automotive polishes, but they're made specially for metal chemical dyes. So there's heavy metal polish, and then there's light metal polish. I just use a microfiber. So generally, with something like the mug or the cup, like those pieces, I won't polish on the lathe because the polish will get very black and darken my wood. I will sit in front of the TV in a bright light and just kind of, polish it out, and just kind of relax. But because this is just a foot and we're going to save time, I am going to polish it on the lathe. You don't need a ton like that. I don't like these bottles as much because they either come out too much or not enough. The Griot's Garage bottles were really great. Let's see, we kind of want to start low so we don't sling polish all over the place. And when you're hand polishing, kind of the easiest way to do, I found to do this is heavy pressure, because you're not really going that fast. You kind of do pretty heavy pressure, but I mean, you can already see just one polish how much, like, I'm almost already there, right? Let's see, I have a little bit more heavy metal. But yeah, pewter polishes up real nice. Once you get it to like, at least 1,000, it's pretty easy. You can go straight to polishes. We'll do a light metal polish too. Like I was talking a little bit, we had some good questions about finishing metal. This metal polish has like some sort of protectant, like UV blocker or something in there. It's supposed to last a little bit longer. I mean, it helps, but it's not, you still kind of want maybe either some like very small protective coating or, that, or just to keep touching it up. If it's, if there's nothing on there, you might have, if it's handled, you might have to touch it up every now and then. And that is kind of the basic process of a pewter foot. So, of course, this piece isn't finished. I didn't finish the bottom of it. But just for the sake of time, this kind of demonstrates the concept, how this pewter foot is held in place by the dovetail that it's cast into. And then I kind of turn that outer part away to reveal the pewter. So I'll go ahead and pass that around. And I think I will go ahead and, okay. Final questions, comments, criticism, praise?